Awesome. This is probably the most get her done video I have ever done and produced. Most of you know me from being the host and executive producer of the Tutu Tango show with Linda Sutton. But today, this is definitely one of those get her done videos. It has been on my heart and spirit to do this for a while. Unfortunately, I've been procrastinating, but definitely time is of the essence now. So I definitely wanted to do this as a gift and a message to my friends and family and loved ones to be able to kind of begin to prepare for some of the things that I've started seeing in the world in terms of crises, disasters, and even civil unrest. So there's a lot of things looming right now in the atmosphere. Of course, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, a multi-wave global pandemic right now. There's been civil unrest over the past couple of years. Here in Texas, where I am right now, last year there was a snowpocalypse, they called it. And even this year, we were able to weather the winter storm, but shortly thereafter, there was a 5-day boil water advisory, earthquakes in North Carolina, wildfires on the West Coast, our typical hurricane season. So there's a lot going on in the world today. And one of the things that I want us to work on today, and the goal of today, is to begin to prepare your 72-hour kit. Now, what is a 72-hour kit? Government and disaster relief organizations such as FEMA, the Red Cross, and the organizations that are behind ready.gov recommend that every person have 72 hours worth of supplies on hand in case of an emergency. Now, why 72 hours as the minimum threshold? Well, for those organizations, the reason that they have chosen 72 hours is because usually in the first 72 hours of any crisis or natural disaster or man-made disaster, the first 72 hours are devoted towards rescue, search and rescue, and the preservation of life and property. And when I say property, meaning the infrastructure that keeps everything going. So that's their focus. So it is on average, not an exact thing, but on average, it will take at least 72 hours for relief to get on the ground, truly be set up, and be able to offer assistance and aid to those in need. So they ask that you have 72 hours worth of supplies to kind of weather that gap and make sure that you and your loved ones have some basic things on hand that might be needed in a variety of disasters or inconveniences even, to be able to weather some of those storms. So that's what we're going to do here. Now there's two different scenarios in which you would do a 72-hour kit. There is the scenario of sheltering in place, and then there's a scenario of bugging out, or having to evacuate your house. So in the shelter in place scenario, the expectation and understanding is for that 72 hours, you're going to hunker down, you're going to be at home, possibly completely confined to the home or very close to the home for 72 hours. So all of the supplies that you would need would be within the home or within very, very close reach of your home or in the vicinity during the sheltering in place. And bugging out, there's a variety of scenarios and situations where literally could be a few days down to a few minutes, you have a bag of supplies that you and each individual in your family or in your group would take with them to be able to survive and have their basic needs met for 72 hours until once again aid and assistance comes in, or the potential that you could return home. Now, it's going to be outside of the scope of what I'm going to do today, but we also have to keep in mind, especially since we've seen disasters like the tornadoes in the Midwest and Katrina, this bag could be the bag that you have to depend on for longer than 72 hours if you cannot return or you're unable to return home after these first 72 hours or after the rescue phase. So just keep that in mind. We're not going to deal with that today. We're just going to get our basics done. I know for anybody that might have been looking at preparedness videos, they can be very overwhelming and daunting because there's so many different levels and so many things to consider. So what I'm going to do is that FEMA, Red Cross, and Ready.gov all have 72-hour lists. So I'm going to kind of combine those and give you highlights. Now, this is not a comprehensive list. The goal of this is quick start, for you to do something this, if not today, sometime within the next few days, to get some basic things in place for your family so that you are not blindsided completely. Another reason why I want to make sure that we go through this and be consciously aware of preparing is because when you ask a lot of people in terms of preparing for a storm or a hurricane, they'll say, oh, well, I've got extra food in the house, I've got extra water in the house, so I'm good. No, that is not emergency preparedness. Emergency preparedness is the conscious mapping out and planning of supplies that you have set aside and dedicated in a specific place that can be accessed to be able to make sure that you weather storms or disasters or crises. And that becomes the baseline for which you build for longer durations of time that might be necessary as if a disaster or crisis has a longer duration or is more severe. So that's what we're going to do here today. So let's get down to it. So thing number one that you need to gather immediately is water. Okay, you can live only a few minutes without air, a few days without water, potentially a few weeks without food. So in terms of air, we'll deal with that in another kind of video, but definitely water. And the recommendation is that at a minimum, you want to have 1 gallon per person in your home per day. Okay, so for 72 hours, that means that you want to have at least 3 gallons of water per person in your household at a minimum. So if you only have one person in your household, you need at a very minimum 3 gallons. If you have 4 people in your household, then at a minimum, you want to have 12 gallons of water for that. So you can kind of see how to do the math on that. That water will be used for cooking, for drinking, for some of your basic hygiene, and for some of your basic cooking. For sanitation, then I recommend another gallon, but that is not the baseline. So at a minimum, immediately get the 3 per person, and then later we can deal with issues such as sanitation and additional water that might be used for things like toileting and more extensive cleaning, and if you had to wash clothes or anything like that, if you had babies or anything like that. So that is 3 gallons of water per person per day. If you get a 24 pack of 16 ounces of water, that is the equivalent of 3 gallons of water. So I recommend some combination, if you can, and you have the space, of larger gallon bottles of water, bottled water, as well as packs, because the packs and the bottles is not the most ecological in terms of sustainability, but it will help you to manage your water if you have to kind of be conservative with it over the disaster. So because it's already pre-measured, for example, rehydrating certain foods, you may already have the allowances here that you can kind of ration a bottle. You could say, for example, a bottle of water to wash your face and brush your teeth, another one for basic hygiene, several bottles to drink, one to boil some tea, that sort of thing. So you can manage your water if you have that. So I recommend the combination of both, easy to manage sometimes than just the larger bottle. The second thing that you're going to need is 3 days of food. And what I mean by food is 3 days of non-perishable, shelf-stable food. And you hopefully want food that does not require refrigeration or freezing. And you may want to consider food that requires little to no water and or little to no fuel or heat to cook. If the food that you have does require water or fuel in order to prepare, then you're going to have to maybe possibly make allowances for additional water for that, depending on what the food is. So I have some examples of that here, and you want enough for each person, 3 days of food for each person in the household. We're not going to get into the idea of calories in longer term scenarios. You definitely want to make sure that you have enough calories on hand and things like that. So I'm not going to, don't get into that right now. Just make sure that you have it in house. And that could be anything from cans of tuna, and I'm vegan, so this is vegan tuna. You can have shelf stable milk. You can have quick oats or grits, or quick or instant rice dishes possibly. Here I have some mac and cheese, so that would be a few minutes to boil the water for that, and it's already prepackaged cheese. You have here energy bars, and I got these for example because there are 20 grams of protein per bar. So with 6 bars, if in a pinch this was all I had, I could make sure that I at least had 40 grams of protein per day plus kind of some basics. Once again, this is a disaster scenario. This is a full nutrition, so at least with a box of energy bars or protein bars, I can have some additional protein for that. It could be anything like nut butters. If you have people that are allergic to peanuts, then you want to be mindful of that, but any sort of nut butters, you can have that. And so these are all examples of foods that people might normally have. In addition, if you have less space, they can be more expensive, but they have a longer shelf life. So once you've invested in them, they could last anywhere from 3 to 10 years. It's freeze-dried food or freeze-dried camping food. So that's an example or a possibility. So here I have 2 different packs of freeze-dried food, and then, for example, this one is an Indian dish. It actually has 2 servings, so it could either be for 2 people or 1 person, 2 meals for 1 person. And the same thing here. It has also the calories. So for example, this one has 430 calories, and so, you know, per serving, and so the whole package could get close to providing some of what you would need for the day. Not all of it, but some of it. And so this is a possibility. As you can see, it takes up very little space. You can, you know, and so therefore it's a way that you can do it. They can be more expensive, definitely, but the shelf life on each of these items can be anywhere from 3 up to 10, at least with this company. And then with other companies, it can be up to 20 to 25 years shelf life, freeze dried, if it's in the number 10 cans. And so it could be well worth the investment, because many of your shelf stable items may have a shelf life of anywhere on average 1 to 3 years. And so you want to make sure that you have something. So if you have space limitations or you want portability, this would you would have the freeze-dried food. And on average, these take anywhere from up 16 or so, maybe up to 24 ounces of water. And so 16 ounces would be one of these bottles per package, 1.5 or so bottles for some of the more involved meals. All right, so that's there for the food. So you want 3 days of non-perishable food per person per day. So 3 days of food per person. The next thing that you want to have is what they say is flashlight. So you want to have a basic flashlight, either a battery operated or a hand crank flashlight. So this is actually a disaster flashlight. It's a weather ready flashlight, and literally it's not battery operated. It's a hand crank that you use, and the more time that you spend cranking it, and this is if you didn't have rechargeable once your batteries ran out, that would determine how long it would happen once it have lighting. Once again, it's a sustainable one, as you can see, because it has light. And then once again, it's just from your hand energy. So this is a good thing to have, especially for potential long term, because it doesn't require batteries. It just requires a little bit of manpower. You can have one or both. And so as you can see, I have both here. Also, they recommend that you have communication in the form of at minimum a portable battery operated or hand crank NOAA radio. So I have a battery operated one here, and this is a way that you can keep track of what's going on. So it's going to keep you, you can tune in to what's going on with the news, any updates on the disaster. You would be able to get through the radio. So you can either get a regular radio or a specific NOAA radio, and they do come in both battery operated as well as hand crank radios if you can see them. If you see them, definitely pick them up, because once again, if your batteries ever go out, or you have a limited amount of batteries, or for whatever reason they're not working, your communication will not be completely down, because you can still operate it because it's hand crank. Speaking of communication, I don't see them yet in most of the emergency preparedness list yet, at least not at the FEMA ready.gov level, but some of them are starting to say you might want to have a power bank. So some sort of power bank that you can use to charge your cell phone or maybe a tablet, so that you can still have communication if the cell towers are still operational in that disaster. So here, one of the things I have here is actually a solar panel power bank. And the reason that I like this one is because you can charge it up initially based on the outlet, and then you can continue to charge your phone using solar panels. So you can have an electric one that you would have, that's already done that. But I love this because, once again, if you have a limited amount of batteries, or you start running through them, then you still have a way using the sunlight to, if that is still there, to charge your phone and charge your tablet. In addition, I like this one because it has an emergency light on it. So there is a light that's on it that you can use to, if I may, use as a mini flashlight. You can be potentially used as an SOS or signaling emergency. So it has multiple functions as well. So I like a number of these solar things, solar batteries, whether it be generators or the panels and things. I'm noticing that a number of them are putting those kinds of features on the power bank. So this is a great one to have. If you can have one for each person that has an electronic device, this is a great one to have there. And the ones that I have are pretty, that one's pretty durable in terms of fall drops and things like that. Okay, so that's communication. The next thing that you want to have is some sort of basic first aid kit. Now this is just a pharmacy-based first aid kit that just has the basics: alcohol swabs, band-aids, maybe some basic pain medication, some compresses, so a basic bleeding and wounds kit, a burns kit. So but make sure you have something. So it can be a small kit, but the key thing is to have something. If you have more skill and medical skill, then you might want to have a more substantial kit, because you might actually be the first responder for your family and your community if you do have some of those basic skills, if you're CPR certified and the like. So that is there. In addition, what I added to this was alcohol wipes. I'm at 75% because of the pandemic. I also have just set aside a bottle of alcohol and peroxide, not to be used together, but I do have that as well to augment, and you can continue to augment with that. So that's what I have for that. The next thing that you want to make sure that you have is sanitation. Now that could just be in the form of making sure you have some basic toilet paper and wipes at home. So that's one part of your sanitation. But then the other thing is if you do not have sewer or water and you're unable to flush your toilet, you want to make sure that you have some sort of mechanism for handling waste for multiple days. And so some more delicate discussion, not as attractive to talk about, but you definitely want to have a plan for that. The first order of business is maybe having several gallons of water that are dedicated solely to flushing the toilet. Now, water will be precious in a disaster, and so you may not want to use your bottled water for flushing the toilet You may want to, if you have a heads up, fill in your bathtub with water and then use that to flush the toilet. Or because sometimes for many toilets, you can still flush the toilet if you pour water into it. If there's, kind of the gravity mechanism of it. So you can still do that. Also, you can have empty bottles that maybe you've used in the past and fill up the tap with that. So, but once again, you can decide on that. For some, you may wish an option would be to have several heavy-duty trash bags. These are not heavy-duty as I would like, but heavy-duty trash bags that you can use actually to line the toilet and then use that to handle waste. And two ideas of how to handle that is by having a bag of kitty litter and using that to absorb the waste as well as odors. It's a way to do it quickly. You can grab a bag of kitty litter, not that expensive, that I just picked up an extra bag. And so that's one way to go about it, to have that on hand if need be. Another way to do that is one of the things that I purchased was Eco Gel. And this is actually porta potty camping / emergency gel packs. And what they do is when you mix them with water or they mix with the waste and a little bit of additional water, it gels and solidifies and traps everything in. So it's kind of creates this kind of gel encasement and kind of traps everything in, including the odors, and makes it kind of solid. And then you can pull up your bag and throw it away. But that's a really, really important one, especially, for example, like I said, in the Texas storm, where the snowstorm lasted anywhere from 5 to 10 days. Very few people talked about the challenges with sanitation, but that's something that you definitely want to have a plan for. Also, having extra wipes and things like that will be important. Matches and a waterproof container. And that's going to work. Oh, excuse me, I have that here. That's my flashlight. It looks similar to that. So this is actually a combination waterproof container, compass, and emergency whistle. So the whistle is used for signaling. So if you were in distress and you needed to get the attention of a first responder. Also, as you can see, it has a way so that it can hang on your neck, so that if you were fatigued or in a disaster situation and you needed to have it on you so that you could possibly signal to a rescue team or first responders, that would be it. If you did have to go out, and this would be just a part of your regular preparedness, because in a shelter-in-place situation, you might need this. That was something that was in Katrina, for example, where rescue teams went from house to house. Some people were trapped in their attics, for example, some on top of their houses, but some people in their attics. And so they could have used something like this to signal to the rescue team that there was someone in the house. So that's an example of that. If you ever had to leave the home, this already has a pre-built-in compass to it. But one of the things I liked about this is that this has a place where it has a signaling mirror if you ever needed that. If you were in distress, for example, once again, it's a small one, but it is there for letting rescue teams know. For example, like in a situation like Katrina. And then, of course, I have waterproof matches in here if a fire needed to be started or something of the like. So that's something that you want to have. Extra clothing, and clothing appropriate for whatever seasons you have in your area. You definitely want to have some set aside. It would be nice if you could have them set aside in that area, just in case it was something that you needed to grab quickly, or you wanted to make sure that you had it dedicated. And so, like, for example, I know some people, they put their clothes away, they may put them in storage and the like, and this would just be nice to have, whatever boots that you're going to use for your emergencies, whatever clothes you might use for an emergency, that extra outfit, sneakers, comfortable walking shoes, any waterproof jackets or the like. It would be nice if you could have an extra set of clothing dedicated just for your emergency area, because as you build on that, that might be something that you would have to run and grab something from, and if you had to leave the house and evacuate very quickly. Any kitchen accessories and cooking utensils, and especially if you have a lot of canned food as your non-perishables, you definitely want to make sure you have a can opener, especially for people that may not use canned food a lot. They may not, that actually happens a lot in disasters where people have the cans and have forgotten the can opener. And so make sure you have that. And if you ever have a go bag, you definitely want to make sure that you have one of those in there just in case. Because that happens, it's interesting that happens with greater frequency than you might realize. Photocopies of any IDs and documents and things in a waterproof pouch if you can. That would be useful to have nearby, once again, because even though this is your shelter in place kit, you may have to grab and go, and that's something that you want to just have already close to that dedicated space for your emergency supplies, whether it be in a tote bag, a tote, or a duffel bag. You want it close there already. Also, in relief efforts, if the duration of the disaster becomes longer, you may need identification to get certain types of relief, and so you want to make sure that you have that there. Some cash and coins, because if power goes out for a long period of time, you may see that a lot of facilities may not be able to take credit cards or process them because a tower might be out or the electrical system might be out. And so you want to have enough cash in small bills in or near your kit somewhere where you could handle small transactions if need be. Now, the goal of a shelter in place is usually to try to be as self-sufficient so that you don't have to go out to get supplies. So you want to have your supplies in-house, but on the off chance that you might have to go out and venture out to get some additional things or something else happens, having some cash on hand will make that easier. Any special needs items, and that means if you have children, if you have pets, or any special medical needs yourself, as well as if you need any feminine items. So those are things that you also want to have and take into consideration and making sure that you have them. So if you have any medical conditions that require medications, you definitely want to make sure that you have enough to take you through 3+ days in the event of a disaster, possibly longer, because it might be a while before the pharmacies are open and available to serve you outside of rescue situations. So definitely that. If you have any medical equipment that requires power or water, then you want to make and plan for special considerations for that. If you have a CPAP machine or oxygen machine or something, you may want to make sure that you have a dedicated power source just for that, because once again, if that equipment is required for your well-being, the first responders may not be able to get to you, or they may not be able to transport you to a hospital facility if there are downed trees in the major thoroughfares and things like that. So they have to be cleared. So just keep that in mind. Of course, pets, you want to make sure you have enough food and water for your pets and any other things that they might need, because their needs are different from humans. And also be aware that we are not talking about in this video, but if you do have to go, you want to take into account that some places, if you have to go to shelters, may not accept pets. So you want to also go ahead and start pre-thinking of those kinds of things. If you have children, definitely any special needs for them, and also comfort items specific for children. This is also keeping in mind that you may not have internet communication for several days. You may not have power for several days. So you want to think about any comfort items or entertainment items or special items to keep your children occupied in a situation where there's a disaster, to keep them calm. And so that might be cards or some sort of games or drawing or books or things like that that may not require power or a signal, even an internet signal, because the towers could be down depending on the disaster. See if there's anything. Last thing, 2 things that I have here are, of course, a dust mask is recommended for the ready.gov bag, and for some of the kits they say recommended an N95 mask. So this was always interesting to me because an N95 mask for a number of kit lists is actually the standard. And my thought was always, I've had a bag since I was in New Orleans, and I had N95s in my kit. And I thought about that many times that, had many people been, had their go bags, then there would have been a higher likelihood that they had masks and potentially even an N95 mask in their kit in their home. And so once again, the importance of having things, even if you think you might not need them, have them on hand, because having a dust mask or N95 mask is actually in the list of readiness items, preparedness items. And then of course, warmth, and that could be in the form of extra blankets, sleeping bags, and or wool blankets, also even hand warmers. Once again, we saw that in the storm here in Texas, where in the homes there was multiple hours where, multiple days where it was below freezing temperatures and people were sheltered in place. So if the power is not available and you don't have, like for example, propane, or you don't have a wood burning stove, then things like wool blankets and extra clothes could be a part of the warmth that you need. So I just wanted to get that to you, get you started. I know it might seem like a lot, but at the very least, start doing each one of those things if you could. Make a list of the things that I mentioned, from food and water, your mask, your power and communications, sanitation, first aid, some basic lighting, your documents. If you make a list of those and you can start checking them off, maybe I definitely recommend getting this as quickly as possible. So that could be, say, for the next 7 days, you're going to tackle 1 or 2 of those categories and at least get yourself set up, and then start to build up to the number of people in your family, or find one category and make sure you at least have 1 day of supplies across the board for everybody, and then build up to 3. So you definitely want to have something is better than having nothing. So I recommend that you do this immediately. There's so much going on in the world right now, and you are going to be in a much better position if you and your family and loved ones have these items. Some of these items, even if not all of these items, some of these items, you're going to be in a better situation, in a better position to weather these storms. If you are in a great position where getting these first 72 hours is not an issue for you, consider creating a basic kit, even if just 1 day, that you may give to a family member or a relative or a loved one or even a neighbor. Once again, because the more prepared everyone is, the better it is for all of us, because then people are able to keep a level head. They're able to kind of map out other strategies if they haven't already prepared a plan. So that is yours. This is your 72-hour emergency kit of supplies. And so once again, the supplies for every person in your household. Very, very important. If you can, do what you can. Build it in your budget. The beautiful thing is some of these things, it doesn't have to be elaborate. You can take an extra $5 or $10 out of your each trip to a store and pick up 1 or 2 things and start to build them up. But like I said, as quickly as you can get this, then you'll be in a better place and then prepare for other ones. So this is Linda Sutton, Proactivity Preparedness, for my active preparers. And I'll be tackling other issues on subsequent videos, but just wanted to give this to you so that you can be ready and be prepared.